Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Soul Call with Kelly B. I'm your host, Kelly Butchert, and I am the most fortunate lady, I think, in this world because I connect with the most amazing guests. And so I'm going to start off by giving out a shout out again to my very dear friend, Emily Teague, who connects me with the most amazing souls. So thank you, Emily. Mwah, big kisses to you. And Emily has connected me with this beautiful soul here today, Catherine Matheson. Catherine, welcome to my podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much, Kelly. I'm very excited to be here. And thank you too to Emily.
Oh, she's a beautiful soul. Now, for those of you that are tuning in, you'll hear that Catherine's accent is a bit different to mine. Catherine, would you like to share where you're from and where you live?
I live in Canada. I was born in Jasper, Alberta, but I've lived most of my life in British Columbia on the west coast of Canada.
Catherine, I'm going to read your bio, and I think, this short bio just gives such an incredible amount of depth, in such few words of what it is that you do. But we're going to hear much more about you in this episode today. So, Catherine is a wisdom seeker, a writer, and a storyteller. Her road to self-discovery has been decades in the making. Her guides include her grandmother Ruby, great-grandmother Catherine, and the grandmother of grandmothers, I love that, who calls herself, now is it Itepe Kanda?
Itepe Kanda.
Oh, beautiful name. I want to hear more about that too. So it was a natural fit for Catherine to begin a podcast called The Grandmother Stories. A recent trip to Ireland has given her further guidance that it's time to step past the grandmother stories and begin stories of ancient wisdom on her new YouTube channel. She also has a writing platform and she's creating new projects where she's going to take her stories to a whole new level. Catherine, welcome. I am so excited about this today.
It's really good to be here. Thank you, Kelly.
So I mentioned Emily a short while ago. Emily and I have the most amazing connection. We have never yet met in person. We met just over a year ago, and I'm so excited to meet her in person later on this year in Glastonbury, of all places. And so we share a lot of information back and forward. We speak daily. And a few months ago, Emily said to me, Kelly, have you listened to this podcast by Catherine Matheson called The Grandmother Stories? You will absolutely love her. And oh my goodness, was she right? So thank you again, Emily. That was why I connected and reached out to yourself, Catherine, because I started to listen to your podcast. So if anybody tuning in today, I'm going to drop links to Catherine's podcast down below. Please go and listen to not just her velvety smooth voice, but the stories. Oh my goodness, the stories are just incredible. So why don't we start with, Catherine, how your podcast came about? That must have been a bit of a journey, I can imagine, because nobody just wakes up one day and thinks, right, I'm going to do a podcast called The Grandmother Stories without there having been perhaps a very interesting journey to get there in the first place. So I'll let you just start wherever you would like to begin with that one.
Thank you. Well, grandmother energy has been in my life all my life. My grandmother Ruby, my mother's mother, lived with us off and on. She had three children, and she would alternate with her three children. And when she came to our house, she and I shared my room. And so she and I became very close. And I have really vivid memories of her taking me by the hand and going with me on long walks. And as she walked, she would talk, and her voice, she had a beautiful voice. And she told me about the cycles of a woman's life and all the things that I would come up against in my life. And she just talked. And I can remember often thinking, why would an 8-year-old girl be interested in what happens to you when you're no longer able to bear children? Like, what are you doing? But I loved her and I loved her voice, and I just let her words kind of sink into me. And I lost her when she was 20. When I was 20, my grandmother passed on. But when I was 24 and I had my first baby, her voice came back to me. Actually, before I had my first baby, I lost a twin pregnancy before my son was born. And I was so deeply depressed. I had a really hard time. At the time, it was the hardest thing that had ever happened to me. And my grandmother came to me in a dream, and she put me in a bubble, and she took me around the world and we were following the sun as the sun was rising, and she was just talking, and her voice was so beautiful, and we were going over lakes and trees and into cities and through tunnels, and her voice the whole time. And essentially what it boiled down to was, you have a finite number of days in the world, and what you do with your days is really up to you, but it's time now to move forward. And I remember I woke up from that dream with tears on my face because I didn't want her to be gone. I wanted to stay with her. But she has stayed with me ever since, and I've heard her voice in hard times, warning me and telling me what to do. It's always been her voice. So she's always been there for me. And I am now a grandmother. I have 3 grandchildren and a fourth on its way in just a few weeks. So that's so exciting.
Amazing.
And my oldest granddaughter is 11 and a half. And a couple of years ago, I started to think about what kind of legacy I'd like to leave for my grandchildren. And so I literally started to write to them as if I was my own grandmother speaking in my own ear for them. I kind of wanted to do that for them, and to be that voice for them of that grandmother energy that will be there for them long after I'm not here. So that's really, and all the stories are stories that of our family, but also things that have happened to me, and insights and wisdom that I've been looking for all my life that they may be interested in the future.
How beautiful. What an incredible legacy of love to leave your grandchildren. And they may be quite young just now, but having recently lost my granny, who I was very, very close to a year past February, she was 90. So I was very fortunate to have her for, well into my 40s. Very, very lucky. And I've recently lost my father-in-law too, but it's even just having those little voice notes, when they've maybe called you and they've left a voicemail and it's still having their voice there, being able to go back and listen. So the fact that your grandchildren will have these beautiful stories that you have written and that you've recorded, but not only that, you've had the generosity of spirit to share them with the world as well, because there is so much wisdom and there is so much honouring of the women who have gone before you, the grandmothers. So you're giving not only you a voice, but your grandmother Ruby and your other grandmothers as well. So it's that
Mhm.
beautiful legacy, isn't it? And there
Mhm.
are so many of us that, I'm saying us as in, a civilization, who over many timelines we've left our own legacies of love, whether it's through beautiful buildings or, I don't know, anything that we've created, art, music, but stories get passed down through, when you go back to the very beginning of time, the star lore, yeah, the stories of the stars. And we are the stars, of course. And then you have all the gods and the goddess and the myths of old. So I love how you are bringing what's contained within your heart? What has been passed on from your grandmother, heart to heart connection, even though you may not have understood all the words that she was sharing with you, but it's the frequency, it's the resonance of the message. And that will activate so many others as well. There is so much in all of this, and I'm trying not to go off on a tangent because I'm starting to tune into various things here. So I'm going to come back to ask you about you had the most incredible visit to Ireland. Was it back in 2017, 2018? And I want to ask you,
2018.
2018, I want to ask you what
Mm.
prompted you to visit Ireland, because I know that you've had 3 visits there, because you've just returned, is that right? Yeah,
Yeah, I've just been there for the third time in the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I would
Well,
love,
I was looking for my roots, you know.
yeah,
We who live in North America often don't know who our family, what our family roots are, much past our grandparents.
yeah,
And that was certainly true for me growing up. All I knew is that my mother's grandfather had been a soldier in the Civil War, and that he and his wife, Catherine, were from Ireland. And there's somewhere in there, someone was a glass blower. And that's really all we had. And there was literally nothing else. No other stories had come forward from any other branch of my family. So knowing that I was Irish and always loving things Irish and being drawn to magical, mythical stories, and knowing there is a tradition of the magical and the mythical in Ireland, I'd always wanted to go. So in 2018, I was invited to a wedding in England and in the Lake District. And so I flew to England and I thought, what a great thing, because I will go to this wedding and then I will go to Ireland. So I flew to England and took a train to Manchester, rented a car in Manchester, drove up to the Lake District, attended, and I had brought a small tent as well. So I was car camping and I camped out in the Lake District to attend this wedding. And then I drove down to Liverpool and took the ferry across to Dublin. And I have to say that standing on the deck of the ferry to see Ireland come into view was a really pivotal moment in my life. I I honestly felt as if I rose up and I was floating 10 feet above myself. And that's how I stayed until I left Ireland 10 days later. So for 10 days, I did car camping and I managed to make the whole route around Ireland, but a whole number of really incredible experiences were occurring to me every day along the way.
amazing, absolutely amazing. And this is again this exploration of, because I truly believe that we are our ancestors. So we carry all of that wisdom within our DNA. So we were actually carried within our grandmother's womb, because baby girls are born with all the eggs inside of them as well. But when we think about, we are our ancestors, we are encoded with all of their love, all of the learning that they've had, also all of the trauma. And very often, as you say, we don't know their stories, we don't know who they were. And so you followed the path back to Ireland, knowing that you were on this voyage of discovery, I suppose. So I love the fact that we have got lots of, and I know that many people, have heritage in Ireland, but all of my great grandparents go back to Ireland. Even my grandparents on my father's side go back to Ireland. And when we had a brief discussion before, I had shared with you that my great grandmother on my granddad's side, so my granddad's mum, her maiden name is Matheson. And she grew up in a place called Lower Largo in Fife, which is a beautiful fishing village. But there's a lot of trauma in the land there. And I've been called to go back quite a few times recently. There's a lot of witch trials and things there, a lot of the wise women who were persecuted, and that's a whole story in and of itself. And this is for me one of the beautiful things about honouring the women, especially who had such hardship. They had such hard lives because they were closed down, they were persecuted, there was a lot of religious indoctrination, and especially when you look at what happened to Ireland, the Emerald Isle. So when we think about the founder, we'll not go too deeply into all of this, but my belief is that it's called the Emerald Isle for a reason. And I believe that there was such a thing as the Emerald Covenant. And a lot of the founder races, the angelic humans, there is so much sacred wisdom held in the land there. And I believe that our tree guardians and the elementals and the guardians of the earth, they carry this wisdom, they hold this wisdom, but so do we in our DNA. And so this goes so much deeper, the fact that you're honouring your grandmothers, the ladies and women, the powerful, beautiful souls that came before you. It's such a voyage, isn't it? I would love if you could, and I know that you'll share so much more of this in your own YouTube channel and in your own stories, Catherine, but what have been some of the most interesting discoveries for you?
In my journey through my own DNA and connecting with my own grandmother and my grandmother's, like my grandmother Catherine, who was born during the famine years in Ireland. So the incredible energy of Ireland, but the incredible trauma as well. And so I will share a trauma story and a visionary story. So when when I landed, when the ferry docked in Dublin, and on my way down the ramp, driving a little tiny Fiat rental car, the back of the back seat suddenly filled with grannies and aunties. That's the best way that I can describe them. All the voices of all, and I knew they were connected to me, grannies and aunties, all women, and all chit-chatting and really happy to have me there in person. And I felt this whoosh of warmth and joy. And they were pointing out, oh, what's happened over there? Oh, I can't believe what were they thinking? And, they're all commenting on all the scenery as I'm driving along. But in the passenger seat is my great grandmother, Catherine Josephine Shelley Dunnigan.
Wow,
And she's sitting there very regal. And she's who I'm named for, by the way, Catherine.
beautiful.
And she said, I want to go to the Famine Museum. And all the grannies and aunties are chit-chatting, and it's like, well, actually have an appointment in South Dublin. I need to get out of the city. I've given myself 3 hours and I have this appointment this afternoon. So no, I don't have time right now to go to the famine museum. And the whole car went silent, and a chill starts coming from Catherine, and she's very quiet. So, do you think I could find my way out of the inner city of Dublin? I got caught in all I was going in circles, and I went through a toll booth after toll booth, and then finally now I'm back in downtown Dublin, and driving along the river Iffy, and I see the great tall famine statues, and it's like they're walking towards us. That's the way that we came. And it's one of those moments, you're in the car and it's like everything goes slow motion, and you're looking, and there they are, they're walking by. And so I thought, fine, we will go to the famine museum if you can help me find a parking spot. So then Catherine says, turn left. So she
Oh,
helped me find a parking spot. And then as I got out of the car, all the grannies and aunties kind of whooshed around me and wished me well, and off they went. And then it was just Catherine and I. And so we walked down and she really just wanted to stand at those statues. We went into the museum as well, but it wasn't the same as standing with the statues. And I cried with her, and they're so impactful for someone who's never seen them before. That was my first, in-person moment of standing with them, and they are so powerful. And she told me a story, and she said, the Shelleys are no longer in Ireland. My family was wiped out. I was among the last of the Shelleys, and we emigrated to the United States. And so, but we were hundreds, Catherine. We were hundreds of Shelleys, and we loved to dance and we loved to sing. And sure, we fought and we drank, but we loved, and we loved to sing, and we loved to dance, and we loved this place. But we can't be here any longer. So after that, after having some tears with her, she was peaceful, and she let me go, and I found my way with no trouble at all to my appointment. Everything opened up for me to find my way there. So she needed to share this trauma with me, and she needed to share that story that I wouldn't have heard any other way. And then, the magic of Ireland really took hold of me then. And I was guided. I went to Tara, and I stood at Tara, and I felt like I was a molecule away, like it was just a membrane away from what it would have been like when it was a hill of kings and queens. I was invited to go to Uisneach, which is the spiritual and geographical center of Ireland, and I was invited to a workshop of there were many shamans in this work. There were only a dozen people. I was the 12th person to join this workshop with a woman named Star. Her name is Trish Cameron, but she goes by the medicine name of Lightning Star. And I met her for the first time through that appointment that I had earlier, and like synchronicities were happening. And
Amazing.
in that workshop, we were invited to go into a meditation. And in that meditation, I met the goddess, and Eru came to me as a huge face. I was like a little tiny being next to this massive, brilliant, beautiful face of the goddess. And she was surrounded by many little shiny beings, and I can only say fairies perhaps, but they were all looking at me, and it was like she was surrounded by a court of beings of actually many sizes. And she began to speak, and I didn't understand a word of it because it wasn't in my language. But the tone was a welcoming tone. It was, it was like she recognized me and was saying welcome, and she was joyful, and yet very she had something to say to me, and all I could do was just listen and be as humble as I could be. And eventually there was it was like a ritual with her in this meditation where she was saying things and the court were saying things, and they were all talking to me. And eventually my throat started to glow. And they were like, okay, that's what we're here for. All done. Off you go. And I had no idea, and now I'm back in the session with the workshop with all the people, and I need to get through the day. And I, of course, Star, her instruction was, whatever happens to you, whatever comes to you is so deeply magic, hold it close for at least 3 days, don't speak about it. And so I couldn't share it with anyone there. and so these kinds of visions and messages were coming to me virtually everywhere I went all around Ireland. So that by the time I left, I didn't want to leave, but I had felt I had been immersed in this very brilliant, beautiful emerald magic for days, and it was just what I needed. I didn't understand most of it. I journaled it all. And when I reconnected with Star after, when I was able to tell her, about a week later what had happened to me, and I said, I don't understand what this is. She said, well, in Ireland we say, give it a year and a day, and then perhaps it'll come clear to you. And so there has been clarity. And part of why this podcast, The Grandmother Stories, happened is sort of what has come through those experiences.
Oh my goodness, just amazing. I mean, some people listening to this will be like, I don't live my life like this. I don't get activations like this when I visit places. And we're going to talk about that as well, Catherine, because, you and I both used to live quite a different world. You lived a fast-paced corporate life, didn't you? You had a very normal 3D life, if you like, for many years, as did
Mm.
I. But then we can visit, we can get a calling, can't we? Or a vision or a dream, and it doesn't leave you. It activates something within you. And it's beyond words what can happen. I mean, listening to you today, I'm being reminded of so many things and, dreams that I've had where, a great aunt had got on a bus with me and it was an old bus, and I could even smell the mustiness of the bus. And it was raining like it is today. And she was sitting with her little plastic rainmate on, and she moved over the seat and she patted the seat. She went, "Come and get a seat, lass." And she spoke to me with such love on that journey. And I remember I woke up and I had tears down my face. And then I panicked because I couldn't remember anything that she told me. And so I tried to force myself to go back into the dream because I was so desperate to remember it all. And I just heard what I would describe as my higher self saying, "It's okay, it's all there. It's all there. Don't worry." And those things, they don't, because I'd had such an emotional response, they don't leave you. Now, I was working in education at that time, and yes, I was having regular meditation practice and I was reading spiritual books and things. But when you have such profound experiences, you think, wow, why was that? What? So you start to get more and more curious. And it's like we're following the breadcrumbs, isn't it? It's like we're following the breadcrumbs that lead you to the next place. And so you live a life now where, I mean, I don't know everything about your life, but you live such an interesting life that you know to follow the signs, you know to listen to the call of your soul. And that's
Mhm.
the name of this podcast, the soul call. You know that there is a purpose, a very deep purpose, not just a personal purpose, but there's a deeper purpose of love because these stories must be heard, these stories must be shared. These are truths. Some of it has been hidden. So some of the history we have been told is not quite the truth, or there are deeper mysteries to everything. So I love that you have followed your heart and followed your intuition 3 times to go back to the sacred land of Ireland to have experiences with the goddess Eru, which Ireland is obviously named after, had experiences with the fair people and the court of the fair people, the fairies, and just allowed yourself to be immersed in the deep mysteries that are there, that are in the unseen world, because isn't it the case that we are so limited and so blinkered by these 5 senses? But when we follow our intuition, we start to activate our supersensory abilities and we go into these realms where the real realness, the more interesting reality, as I call it, the quantum reality opens up to us. So some people would call this grid work that you're doing, activating light and activating memories within. And the beautiful way that you described that listening to your grandmother and all the aunties in the back seat led you to release trauma. The
Mhm.
tears that you shed, those
Mhm.
had to be shed. Those sacred waters had to flow so that their voices were heard, that they were honored, that you were crying with them. And I just think it's so beautiful because you are them. You are them. And
Mhm.
this is where I get really excited by the stories that you share because I know by listening to them myself, it's awakened and activated so much in me. And I know that it'll awaken and activate so much in others. So I would love if you could just to weave in a little bit about this was my life before I did this, because some people might think, oh, that's quite an alternative life that those two live. My life isn't like that because I'll be honest, Catherine, many of my friends don't do this. So they maybe don't
Right,
understand it. So I would love
right.
if you could just to kind of navigate us back to how this all opened up for you and why it's so important that us women collectively really listen and follow our intuition.
You bet. Yes, I was a journalist. That's how I started. At 19, I took a job as a reporter in a radio television station. And before long, I was anchoring newscasts, nightly newscasts on television. And I worked in a small market and a medium-sized market. And I worked in Vancouver for a little while at the radio station there over the course of 15 or 20 years. And then I moved from journalism into communications, the public relations, some would say the dark side. And it really did feel dark for me because I worked for the Environment Ministry for the government of British Columbia. I worked for the Forest Ministry. And in communications for forestry, you are you're justifying things like clear-cut logging.
Mm.
You are, telling other people's stories. You're working with the program people, and you are helping scientists explain to the layperson why they're doing what they're doing. So there's a lot. There was a lot of land use policy, communications plans, and strategies, and even when forest fires happened or flooding happened, then being, those communication people who are in the background who are helping to make sure that people stay safe. So for the better part of 40 years, I was telling other stories about other people. And through the whole course of it, you have what I call, we call a mask. You have that professional mask where regardless of what people are saying around you, if you're in a room with a minister, for example, who's having a temper tantrum and throwing pencils, and you hold that mask. If you are in a room filled with people who are trying to figure out how to put a spin on a story, you hold that mask.
Mhm.
And it became more and more difficult as I grew older, because I was also really keenly trying to follow something something in my heart. So I call it, looking back, I understand now that there was an intuitive part of me that was trying to get my attention. And I would say to anyone now who's in a situation where, you feel frustrated or there's this level of anger and you're trying to hold that mask and you're feeling it crack a little bit. If you are feeling unfulfilled, like there's something missing, then there probably is something missing. And it means that there is something calling you. And you can call it your intuition or you can call it your soul. I love that you call your podcast the Soul Call, Kelly, because really that's what it's about. Your soul is trying to let you know that you're not necessarily here on this planet to fulfill other people's expectations of you, or to continue to stand in that role that you've created for yourself, to be that professional person or to be that person in the workplace who is not necessarily your authentic self. Your authentic life, the heart of who you are, the purpose for your presence here on the planet, especially now with the world the way that it is. If you are feeling that sense of unfulfillment, then it is because you are being called to something different. And so how do you follow the right way then? And I guess what I've learned I've learned that you ask your heart.
Mhm.
The hard
Simple
part, and
as that.
you develop a relationship with your heart. And what's really difficult is you can ask your heart, and your heart will tell you something, and you're going to say, but that's too difficult. That's going to hurt. That's going to make people see me differently. That's going to change the course of my life if I do that. But if you continue to go this way, you're going to become more and more closed down and less happy. And even ill, and your heart is trying to and so you can wait until everything falls apart and cracks up on you and you are now physically ill, or you can start to listen to it and follow it. But most of us have to wait till we're ill. And so I have to say, I hit the wall not once, but twice in my career. And the first time it took me to a year, but I picked myself up and I went back into the fray. And I was changed. It was harder for me to hold it together. It took another 10 years and I hit the wall again in 2021. And it was a moment in a workplace where you have the mask, but something happened in that workplace in that moment. And I can say it was around COVID and trying to communicate, what was happening with that organization, and people were upset and they needed to have some info, and they weren't going to get the information that they needed. And the only way I can describe it is I kind of went full Hulk for about 90 seconds. I just kind of went, and that is not who I am. I don't respond to things that way. I've been very carefully, you know, cultured and polished all day long. So for me to kind of lose it like that, my whole team just kind of turned their back and okay, and they left me alone. But I went home that night and I started shaking and I couldn't stop shaking, and I didn't go back to work. I couldn't go back because I couldn't trust myself that I wasn't going to lose it again. And so from there, it was a 2-year journey to understand that, no, this is who I am. So it in 2022, it took me a year to come to the place where I finally started my podcast, my Grandmother Stories podcast. I started to understand that you are a storyteller. These stories need to come through you. You need to share them somehow. And mostly I wanted my grandchildren to have the stories. So again, it's under, and when that started to happen for me, I started to feel happier and lighter and more blissful and more grounded and more authentically myself. And so even if it seems like I'm out there and I'm talking about things that are not usual and I'm embracing um, a side of life that is unseen to most people, it makes me healthier and happier, and it opens up more. So I'm not saying that for everyone you're going to find your way into weirdness necessarily, but weird
Oh,
itself is a good word, right? But I am saying that all of us have a light, and all of that light is needed now more than ever in this world. And if we can begin to start with that relationship with our heart and follow what our heart is pointing us toward, even if it means that other people's expectations maybe have to shift for us. It does require a little bit of courage. And if you ignore it, you will hit a wall. So I really hope that people don't have to hit walls anymore. I really hope that people can begin to trust their heart more and to follow what their heart is pointing them toward, their soul call for them. So
that is just so beautifully articulated, and your story and how you have been led to the path of, I mean, your whole journey has been leading you to this point, hasn't it? I mean, even the fact that you started in journalism, telling stories, seeing the other side of truths as well, knowing how the world has been operating, maybe not necessarily with the right intent always as well, and how there are distortions of truth and different versions of truths in all ways. And I mean, I worked in education for 22 years of my adult life, and it's a programming centre. No matter how much beauty you bring and creativity and love that you pour into your job, education has been set up in the mainstream as a programming centre with maybe not necessarily pure intentions behind it. And when I started to see more and more of the truth of that, I could no longer align with, I just couldn't stay complicit in the system a minute longer. So I completely understand the built up frustration, the anger, the mask wearing every day, showing up to try and, be in your head and do this job. And again, it's the programs that are running, but we need to see it. We need to understand it in order to heal it and to almost take like a different route, like you say, through the heart. So I
Mm.
talk about, I've moved from being a head teacher. So I was a school principal, we call them head teachers in Scotland. And now I'm a heart teacher. And that's why I help many women. And I call myself a soul purpose coach to, really get to the depths of who they are and what they're coded with, what their divine gold print is, to open up their soul gifts. I help women to listen to their own intuition, and it's not difficult. It's just that we've been programmed not to. So it's like the great unlearning. It's the
Yeah.
coming back to remember the wisdom and forgetting a lot of the programmed knowledge that has been planted into our heads, because the way that this planet has operated for such a long time is we will place the self-saboteur running really strongly in the program. We'll install all sorts of programs in people through the TV, the media, and you know yourself, having worked in the media for a long time, through education, through music, all sorts of frequencies will destabilize the root chakra so that people are in that place of disharmony, not feeling stable within themselves, feeling a bit ungrounded, uncertain, fearful a lot of the time. And then we control their minds with all the programming. And so I call it the great unlearning, and it's the remembering of the wisdom that we hold, and to know that you're not, well, you really are losing your mind, aren't you? That's the whole point. You're not going bananas, you're not, that's the other distortion, losing your mind. Yes, you want to lose the mind's control and you want to go into that internal sat nav of your heart and follow that. Finally attune yourself to the call of your soul. And then your world opens up. Then you start to notice the signs and the divine synchronicities that were always there.
Mhm.
Then we start this, gosh, it's not weird and it's not strange. It starts to become very normal when you start to hear this still inner voice and the voice of the mothers and the grandmothers that came before us. But I love how devoted you have been to that, Catherine, and how
Mm.
you have shared the most incredible stories, as I say, on your podcast. So I wonder if you could, I know that there'll be too many to choose from, but we briefly mentioned the grandmother of grandmothers, Itepe Kanda. I would love to just give her some honouring here and some space and time. So how did you discover that she was one of your ancestors?
Thank you. That's a really great question. I'm excited to tell you. So there is we have what that great inner universe, and our ancestors are the ones who help us navigate it. And so there is a place that was shown to me in meditation for how to really go deeply into my own inner universe. And so it involves 3 stone circles and a well, and the well has a light over a flame over it. So it's stones, and each stone has a name. And in my meditation, I'm standing at the threshold with the stones, and then they all share their names with me, and then that energy comes through, and I step 9 steps to the next stone circle, and there are 10 stones that share their names with me, and then there's 7 steps, and there are 5 stones that share their names with me, and then 3 steps to the well, and the well has qualities that it shares with me, and then there are 3 steps up the well, and then there's the flame that shares its qualities with me. And as I stand in my meditation, then I'm very deeply into my own inner universe. And that well sometimes turns into a hallway, and the hallway is lined itself with stones, and each stone represents an ancestor. And one meditation, I went so deeply into the well and down the hallway, it was like I went down to the very beginning. And at the very beginning was this great, lovely energy that introduced herself to me as Itepe Kanda, the grandmother of grandmothers. And one of the things that she really needed me to understand is that we live in a world filled with cycles. Just as the seasons are a cycle and the years are a cycle, there are cycles of years, cycles of dozens of years, of hundreds of years, of thousands of years. And we as humanity go through many cycles. And those cycles also include beginnings and endings. And so when the world ends, when it feels like the world is ending, it doesn't mean that humanity is necessarily ending or that the world itself is going to blow up. It means that there is an ending to a cycle that is coming. And so one of the things that she shared with me is that the knowing that there is an ending, that we are in as humanity of a cycle. There's a great cycle that is shifting. We know that we're going into the age of Aquarius if we're not there already. There's a transition. And so she's in my life, I feel, to help me understand this transition and to begin to explain it in a way that's not too frightening for my grandchildren and for the rest of the people out there who may be willing to hear what she has to say. So that's how she introduced herself to me, and that's what her presence means to me. And she is a deep sense, a deep energy of peace and comfort and understanding that no matter what, that's what grandmothers do, right? They let you know that no matter what, everything's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. Hold on to your heart, stay centered and grounded, and understand that everything, it goes through a cycle and that this too shall pass.
So beautiful. It's the divine mother frequencies, isn't it? It's just, it's so sacred and so beautiful. It's like coming back to the mother's bosom, isn't it? It's like the nurture and the nourishment that humanity needs. So this is the time, the Aquarian age. I love how you said sometimes when I'm going into the meditation, it becomes a corridor, because I really do feel like it's like a birthing, isn't it? It's like we're coming down, the birth canal. We're coming down the corridor into this new creation that we are weaving together. It's like a beautiful merging of the ancient wisdom and the new earth. So it's this beautiful tapestry, this beautiful new light that's coming forward. And I love how you described how you go into your journey, how that was even shown to you. It's like your unique safe space. And when I'm teaching, I'm a teacher at heart, so I use the word teaching, but I believe first and foremost I'm a learner. We're all here to learn. So when I say teacher, I don't mean that I'm above anybody else, but when I'm sharing and facilitating women's circles myself, I've got a membership where I help women to deepen into their own intuition. And I always say, find your own pathway. And
Mm.
I'll give you inspired ideas that have, been downloads for me for meditations. And it's lovely to have different experiences. But to get into your heart, to get into that safe space first is so, so important. And it's really interesting to me that mine has changed over time. I've chosen different stories to immerse myself in. And for a long time, I used to walk along a beach, and it was a Scottish beach, not far from where I live. And along at the end of that beach was a little white cottage. Now, it's not there in reality, but this is in the astral realm that I go into. And this little white cottage with a little white picket fence around it, and it had a beautiful cottagey door, and there was always a white seahorse knocker on the door. So even the
Wow.
symbology of that. So I would knock the door and I would wait for my guide coming and inviting me in. It was always very motherly and warm. And I would smell the homemade soup. You know, it was
Wow.
like you were going home and it felt safe. And I would go down the corridor and I would always go to the last room on the left and I could smell the hearth. And when I think about the
Mhm.
hearth, the home fires. So it felt like a beautiful log fire burning and you could
Mm.
feel the warmth on your skin as you entered the room. And that's
Mm.
very often where I've met my granddad, who passed many years ago, in there. And I've had some beautiful conversations with him. But I've also had very cosmic experiences in the hearth of that little cottage. And then over time, different teachers and different mentors to me have taken me different routes into my heart. But right now, I have been called to sit inside a crystalline cave, and it's a sapphire cave.
Wow.
And just last week, there was a fire for the first time
Mm.
inside that sapphire cave. And I know it very much connects to Venusian energy, and it's the blue ray energy of Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, Isis, that goddess energy. It carries the divine mother frequency, and it's so beautiful. So I wonder, Catherine, what would your advice be to anybody who has never done any of this before and they're thinking, I want to start this, I want to try this, this sounds really, really exciting. What would your advice be to someone to start to find their route into their heart, dropping from their head into their heart?
Mhm. It's a big question and, baby steps. I guess the first thing is to begin to accept that you are more than your body and to know that you house not just your own energy, but as you say, you hold the DNA of your ancestors and that your body is in itself an incredibly amazing work of organic technology that dates back hundreds of thousands of years. And so everything that you hold within you is meant not just for the physical work that you do in the living and the walking and the breathing through your life, but that you have a heart with an energy that expands out 10 times greater than the energy of your mind. Your heart energy is so connected not just to the universe, but to all the people around you and to all your ancestors. So I would really start with, even if you don't know who your ancestors are, by seeing yourself as a circle of one. And I do have a podcast, I think it's the second one, which is telling you who your ancestors are and how they are your navigators in your internal universe. And I would suggest a meditation where you see yourself as a circle of one, and you see the two parents and the four grandparents and the eight great grandparents, and exponentially understand that it goes out so that by the time you get to something like circle 250, you're looking at 70,000 great grandparents, and that all of them uh, a are a part of you. You hold a piece of all of them going all the way back. And so that's in itself something to think about. And that's, you think it's external, but really it's internal. And then you take that circle of one of who you are and you begin to let it spiral inside of you. And you sit with the knowledge that you hold the pieces of tens of thousands of people who have gone before you, and you hold, yes, perhaps some of the trauma, but you can choose to say, I would like to know the highest good for my highest good and the highest good of my ancestors. I would like to understand and feel what is meant for me in that mix, because the thing that they tell us, the knowledge that I hear is that 9 of your ancestors had a say in you coming into the world. So it was not necessarily just your mother and father and the creation of you, although that was a huge part of your story, but your story is far deeper and wider and goes way beyond that. So if you have now, if you think about 9 ancestors, maybe one is 10,000 years ago, maybe one is 100 years ago, maybe one is your grandmother. But whoever those 9 are, if you, for your highest good, can sit and know in your inner universe that you have a connection to all of that on the external and all of that on the internal, and now you are sitting with your 9 ancestors, what would they have to say to you? And it's something that you can, it's actually your heart speaking to you, but it's one way that you can build a construct, a framework for yourself to begin to do that work. And I would suggest, I mean, not everyone is built for journaling, but if you could journal it, if you could, because the beauty of having a journal is that sometimes things will come through you and be said to you that you forget the next day, like, or you forget in the next hour.
Mhm.
So if you can write things down as soon as they come to you or as soon as you are able, then and kind of keep track of it, that becomes your roadmap, because you can start to ask questions in your journal. You can say, perhaps you're speaking to you can say, dear ancestors, what is it that I need to understand about this situation right now? I had huge, long, rambling conversations with my grandmother on a daily basis, where I would, every night before I went to sleep, I would just write, dear grandma, do you have anything to tell me? And then she would start to speak. So it's a relationship with yourself, with your ancestors, with your heart, with your intuition, with your soul, that you can begin to create for yourself. And that's one way to do it. If ancestors doesn't resonate with you, I know that you have many other ways that you can help people find their road. But I also agree that everyone has a different path. That's just one suggestion, and if it resonates, I hope it helps.
I love that so much. Somewhere I have a book called The Circle of Nine, and it was
Wow.
a mentor and coach of mine. I can't remember the name of the author. I must look it out. I've never finished it actually. I must go back and find it and read it again. But a beautiful coach of mine, Senga Cree, I was sharing with her that 9 is my number. Nine's just so, so important in my life. And she
Wow.
sent me that book as a gift, The Circle of Nine. And it's about the Divine Mother and the different archetypes of the Divine Mother. It's so beautiful. So I think you're prompting me to go back and find that book again. And I love how you've described, how the heart is, it's everything, isn't it? It's the most ancient Stargate portal in the
Mhm.
universe. That's our way in to
Yes.
the universe within, the cosmos within, because what we experience inside of us, inside the microcosm, if you like, every cell of our being, we see that reality out in the macrocosm. There is no difference. We live in symbiotic, or we're trying to get back to living in symbiotic relationship with nature, with what's most natural to us. And what you mentioned much earlier on in this conversation, Catherine, is when you don't honor your true, authentic self, when you are
Mm.
masking what's genuinely there, you can become ill, and you can hit rock bottom, as you said. And, like you said, I hope people get there without having to hit rock bottom, because many of us have experienced what some people would describe are breakdowns or dark nights of the soul, call it what you will, but it's
Mhm.
the undoing, isn't it? It's like, it feels like you are at the bottom of the well, you're at the depths of despair. I can't see a way out of this. I mean, I've had suicidal ideation in my life. I've had really, really dark thoughts. I've had periods of depression. I've had near-death experiences, which weren't that, they were quite the opposite, but experiences that your mind cannot understand, your mind can't compete with that. But sometimes, you know, well, I always believe that the breakdowns lead to breakthroughs if we trust, if we surrender to trust, and we don't try to get into competition with it, and we don't try and force our way out of it with the mind, because it gives us an incredible opportunity then to surrender to trust, go into this beautiful ancient Stargate portal and start to live your life from your heart. Because when we don't, we become so misaligned with our true path, with our true divinity, with our true soul gifts. So I love that you've shared all of that so honestly as well, because, you know, sharing this openly will absolutely help other women, will help your grandchildren, will help my daughters and their daughters and everybody else's daughters that tune into your wise words, to know that we do not have to suffer anymore. If you
Yes.
live your life heart-led, then suffering doesn't need to happen. We can start to live from an elevated place of consciousness. So bring your awareness inwards. And when I think about ascension, it's actually ascension. It's always the inward journey, isn't it? That's where, because
Yes.
it really is within us. It truly is within us. And we've been
Yes.
sold such lies about our DNA. We've been told, you know, 2 strands of DNA, the rest is junk.
Mhm.
There's another program.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
agree. I think it's what brings your soul bliss,
Mhm.
what makes your heart happy, what soothes your mind. That's the way your intuition is leading you. And even if it feels like a hard path to get to that, if you know, if you can feel that pull,
Mhm.
there's a pull.
Mhm.
And, you know, speaking from experience, for me, it was being in a marriage that was over, that I needed to have the courage to leave, and understanding that there was no support for me in what I needed to do because I was becoming too weird, and choosing to embrace the weirdness because that was the pull. That, okay, that's where I have to go. And trust is the big one. So it's that what makes your heart happy. It's what bliss seems to be beckoning you toward, and knowing that even though things and people may have to fall away from you in the process, because most paths do involve a dark night of the soul, and they do involve choice. You have to make a choice. You have to choose, are you going to follow that authentic voice, or are you going to continue, as we all do? There's no judgment, because we all have followed the path of, well, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but there's no judgment. We have to learn our way, because there's never, I mean, we talk about school, but there's no school for this. There's no school that says, who are you authentically, little one, and how can we help you be your most authentic self? There maybe once was, many millennia ago, and some of us may have memories of that. Man, where is the teacher that's going to come through and tell me how to meditate properly so I can find my way into my own inner universe? But as you say, it's what gives you bliss, what gives you happiness, what what's going to make you feel whole and authentic, even though you're going to have to let the shards of all the inauthentic parts of yourself fall away. It is very difficult, but it is what's beckoning you, and it's what's calling. And if you allow and trust those things to fall away, then you will find yourself in a place. I'm not saying I'm fully there yet, but I know the pain of things falling away, and I know what it's like to have people look at you differently. But at the same time, I know what it feels like to feel myself differently. And so when I choose myself and I choose my heart and my own intuition, um, I just know that I'm doing what I'm meant to do and what I'm called to do. And that's everything.
And I think this beautiful pathway of initiations, are the challenges that are there to help our soul evolve and grow. And
Mm,
so there will be a letting go of people, but
mm,
we're creating more space then to attract and magnetize the beautiful people that are a vibrational match for us as well, for that next initiation that will come. So it's this onward journey, isn't it? It's like these divine fluctuations on the way up, as one of my coaches describes it. It's these beautiful spirals, you know, it's worlds within worlds. It's like we're always going to have challenges, and our soul longs to learn more, to be more, to experience more, because we are God, Goddess manifest in human form. Like you say, we are spirit beings first and foremost, having this human experience so that we can be more and we can anchor in more light and love into this world. So I love everything that you've shared here, Catherine. It's been so wonderful to connect with you. And I would love to hear more about your setting up a new YouTube channel, because you're talking about your Grandmother Stories podcast is such a beautiful creation. I know that you write stories, so you might want to mention your Substack option there as well. But would love to also hear a bit more about your new YouTube channel that's coming.
Thank you. You know, this is an example of what happens when you stay connected to your intuition. And so when I went to Ireland this time and I've only been home for a week now. I was expecting in Ireland to get a whole bunch more energy for the stories that I'm writing and my podcasting, and for everything to just be super juicy when I got back. And I was a little bit uprooted. And I was told in no uncertain terms that I need to put my podcast on hold for a while, and that I need to shift the stories that I'm telling in Substack. I do need to focus on the stories in YouTube. Really, there's this knowing that I am a kind of an Akashic librarian. There's a bookshelf assigned to me full of stories. And there are beings who are trying to get their stories through me. And that's so I'm not responsible for the rest of the library up there, but there is a certain shelf that I am assigned to. And one story in particular is my soul has been called to tell, and it's about my great grandfather. I mentioned him earlier. He was a Civil War soldier, and he was involved in the Indian Wars. And there's a story about him that I have been working on for the last 15 or 20 years, and it's just been very painful, because to me it's like, of all the stories, like we're talking the streets of the gangs of New York meet dances with wolves. That's the life that he lived. And there's so many stories that could be told, all the battles he was in. No, there's the story of his final battle that must be told, and there's a supernatural element in it. And his nemesis was a shaman, and of the Native American shaman. And so I have struggled with cultural appropriation, and how am I going to tell a story like that with a trope of the Indian shaman and not honor that culture? So I've had a number of experiences with a friend. Anyway, I could go on, but that story is taking up so much bandwidth in my heart and in my soul, and it's unfinished. It's about 3/4 completed. And it's actually become like a huge spiritual logjam for me in my heart and in my spirit. And until I finish that, all the other stories are going to have a hard time coming through. So all of that to say that it's time for me to finish this story. And it's called, the working title is Ruin, but because it's about what happens in his last battle and this meeting of him with this, and it's has to be told by someone from his bloodline. It has to be, he's been waiting for someone in his bloodline, one of his descendants, to be able to listen well enough to tell the story. And so I've been listening all right. And I've been saying, really, are you kidding me? And sometimes he comes to visit me and I'll pour him some scotch. We're not talking tea here. We're talking a shot of scotch. And he's been telling me the story, and it is a wild story. And I've struggled against it for a long time. But my instruction in Ireland was clear. This story, until you tell this story, all those other stories can't come through properly. So I'm honoring that. And I put a message out a couple of days ago that the podcast itself will still be available, and there are 31 episodes there for anyone who's interested who hasn't had a chance to hear them yet. But I won't be adding new episodes for a little while. And I'm dedicating my Substack to stories of my great-grand, to finishing that story. I'm going to share the journey I've been on, because as you can hear, there's lots of stories behind the story. And so that's what my Substack is going to be about. And I'm going to be also taking the stories from the podcast and refining them and putting them together as videos. And so what you're going to be seeing on the YouTube channel, which is the Stories of Ancient Wisdom YouTube channel, are the podcast stories sort of reimagined and redone as the video. So that's my work moving forward, and that's what I'm being called to do. And so allowing my podcast to fall away for the moment, and allowing, the other stories that I had been posting on Substack to fall away for the moment, focusing on this story of my great-grandfather and completing it because it has to get finished.
That's so beautiful. And that is the perfect example of surrendering to trust and following the inner voice,
Yeah,
following that and trusting that. What a beautiful note to finish on, Catherine. Can you
thank you.
I'm going to put all your links down below this episode, but the name of your YouTube channel, is it up yet? Is it available yet?
Yes, there are three videos so far on my new YouTube channel. It's called Stories of Ancient Wisdom, and the link will take you there. And the Substack page is, you'll find it at catherinematheson.substack.com, but it is also called Stories of Ancient Wisdom.
Amazing, amazing. Catherine, I cannot wait to go and watch those videos. They're going to be awesome. And there are 31 incredible episodes still available on Spotify. That's certainly where I've listened to them. And again, I'll put the link below of the stories of the grandmother stories. And I cannot wait to check out, this book when you write it and watch your YouTube channel. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom that you have today. And I would love to have you back in the future sometime, Catherine. It would be such an honour. I just
Anytime.
really, really, really hope that everybody that's tuning in and listening starts to journal, starts
Yes.
to go inward and really start to find someone. If you don't know where to start, find someone that can help you to, to start journeying inwards, listening to your own voice, because so many more of these stories need to be heard. We need to honour our ancients, that have came before us, all the incredible wisdom that's held within us is all waiting to be revealed. And you are the perfect example to show us exactly how to do that, Catherine. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
It's
It's
been
my
great
pleasure.
having you.
Thank you.